Hey there, Wargamers, adjusting our paint here today. Boom! We're going to go ahead and finish up our tutorial Turkina. I'd like to welcome you guys back to the channel. If you are new here, please alpha strike that like, subscribe button, smash them like you're trying to blow up the enemy mech, but instead we're going to take all the energy and we're going to focus it into helping the channel grow. If you're a returning viewer, thank you for tuning in. Welcome back. Appreciate you being an awesome Sibkin Lance mate. Star mate, I appreciate you having my 6 here and helping the channel grow. Thank you. Today we're going to be finishing up the canopy on our Turkina, and we're going to be using some speed paints from Army Painter for that, and we're going to be using Blood Red, Magic Blue. We've got the speed paint medium. We've also got a little bit of white here because we're going to need some of that to do the glints of light. And of course, we've got a little bit of water. That said, this is not going to be to the same level of the stuff that you may have seen from me on my Instagram and so forth. This is trying to show you guys some techniques and do things quickly. So to that end, this is going to be using the speed paints rather than traditional paints, which you could absolutely do a much cooler job with the regular paints if you wanted to, but for this we're going to be focusing on speed. So that said, we're going to go ahead and get these shaken up and get them prepped for the mini. Alright, so I've got our red and our blue here mixed up, and I've just thinned this down just a little bit, and we're going to come in and we're going to apply them kind of on opposite sides of the canopy here. So I'm going to have blue in the top left, and we're going to have red in the bottom right. And we're going to kind of make triangles here and fill in as we go. So blue to the top left. I'm using one of my nicer brushes here. Get a little bit more control. There we go. And we're going to do something similar on this side. Alright, so now I'm going to come in with our red and we're going to fill in on the opposite side. Going to try and limit them meeting in the middle for now. We want these to go on and kind of be our initial coats and go dry. You notice occasionally I will go to the back of my thumb to pull off excess just so I'm not doing anything too heavy. We've had some that has overlapped there, so we'll clean that off. Okay, and then we'll come over here and do the same thing. Now we've already got a little bit of overlap with the blue on the middle one, so we're just going to kind of go across the middle with our red over that blue. We're creating the kind of midpoint here. Okay, and you notice how it's a little darker in the middle, so we're going to give that a moment to dry and we'll come back and we'll start working in the rest. In between layers here, I have applied a little bit of matte varnish to seal that up just to prevent tearing, but now we're going to come back in with a little bit more of our contrast paint and we're going to start trying to kind of blend our layers together. So I've got blue here right up to the middle, clean our brush very quickly, grab some red here, bottom side, and we're going to try and feather the middle. So we should be getting kind of a purple look. Okay. There we go. So I came back with some more blue, and we're really working the middle part there because we want that to be kind of dark. And we're going to grab a little bit more blue so I feel like someone's come up, and we're just going to pull to the corner. Okay. So we're trying to work in a little bit of a gradient there. That's all. And you can play with this as much as you want. This is a little bit easier for me with the standard pro acrylic paints that I'm used to working with. But you know, if you've got these on hand, you can make do with what you got. Okay. Still pretty happy with what we've achieved here. Bit of our blue. Okay. There we go. I think that's a pretty reasonable gradient. Now we're going to let this dry, and we're going to come back in and start enhancing it just a little bit before he's finished. I've gone ahead and prepped some of our white paint here, and for the next step we're going to be adding some of the the glints of light, so to speak. So we're going to come in, and on the bottom edge, we're going to try and pull a white line and leave as much of that red showing as possible. We want this to be very thin. Don't want it to be thick. So there we go. You'll notice I pull on the back of my thumb very often to pull excess paint away and get a fine tip. Helps control the load and helps get the tip where you want it to be. That was a little thicker than I wanted it to be, but we'll make do. Okay. We're going to do the same thing over here on this one. Okay. Now we're actually going to do this on the top side on the blue as well. And there'll be a reason for this. There we go. And I'm going very sparingly. I'm not using a whole lot of white paint here. I'm just loading up a little bit and doing a little bit at a time. So I like where that is at. You could stop there if you want, but the next step I would do is a little bit of glazing, and then we'll do a final couple touch-ups of white, and this guy will be ready to roll. So we'll give that a quick second to dry, and then we'll come back in and start enhancing it. So we've given that a moment to dry, and we're ready to roll. I've gotten our contrast paint or speed paint prepped, and it's very thin. We're going to be using this kind of as a glaze now. So we're going to be grabbing some of this red, and you'll notice when we pull it over our white on our hand, that's super duper thin. So we're going to be coming in, and we're going about the halfway point, and we're just going to pull back towards the bottom right, and then we'll grab some of our blue, not too worried about cleaning our paintbrush, and we're going to start up at the top left and then kind of meet the red in the middle. We're just going to try and feather that to transition a little bit. And look at that. And you can do this as many times as you want. Just know that it's going to kind of get a little bit more intense and darker every time. So there's kind of a break point. But if you do the glazing really, really thin, you got a lot of opportunity to do layers. And I'm working very quickly with this. If you were wanting to spend an hour or two doing it, you could really work your transitions. But I think for what we're trying to do here, this is just fine, and maybe teetering on a little bit of an advanced technique for you guys. But I honestly think nothing I've done here is anything that you guys can't do. I really think that this is pretty simple and rather forgiving. And if you do mess up, just put down some matte varnish and then re-white this out and start working on it again. I say to matte varnish and white it out because I'm using the 1.0 speed paints, and those tend to reactivate or bleed and they peel off. So don't feel bad if you want to do a layer or two of sealing varnish in between what you're working on, just so that you're more confident you're not going to peel up paint. So better to be safe than sorry. Better to add less paint than more, because you can always go back and add more paint. You can't go back and add less. Once you're satisfied with your glazing, I'm going to come back in with our white paint here, and we're going to reapply those glints of white, but we're going to hyper focus on the bottom edge and not the full thing, because we got that little bit of transition from the glazing. And we're just going to kind of hit the bottom corner. All right. And then you have a few options here for how you handle the blue. I will generally do a light blue kind of edge on the opposite side, but in this case we've got white, so that's what we're going to work with because we're trying to use speed paints. And I'll tell you, trying to pull lines while holding this and talking into a mic and keeping it under the camera is a little difficult, so I apologize if this is a little slow or if I'm shaky. I have a lot that I'm trying to kind of manage, and that white line at the top was not exactly what I wanted. So while it's still wet, I'm just going to come in and try and feather that edge there. Same thing on this one. And as Bob Ross would say, we don't make mistakes, we have happy little accidents. So we'll come over to the other ones, and some of those are going to be a little more difficult to get straight lines. If your model that you're working on with that has that issue, just do like a little white dot or something. But in this case, I think we can get in. A little bit that we touched there. Okay. All right, and now I like to add a couple of dots. So we'll come in and got our paintbrush loaded here. And I'll usually do a couple dots like so. And we can get one of those a little bigger. There we go. And I feel like our little one down there is not very good, so we'll adjust that too. And if you feel like this is blending in with your contrast paint, you can come back in and do a little bit more, which for me it was blending in because I did not seal between this step, and that is why. Okay. And then depending on kind of what look you're going for, one final thing that I sometimes do is I'll kind of put a little streak across the glass. And I should say I'm using standard white acrylic paint here. I'm using that Winsor Newton stuff I used previously in the video, or in the series. I'm not using white contrast paint for this. It would not do what we need. So sometimes I will come in and do something like this. You can skip this step if you want. Kind of gives you like a little bit of light sheen or a scratch, and that one was a little bit thick, so tighten that up. And you can really spend a bunch of time on this area if you want to, but I think with that right there, I think that is where I want to end with the color. We are going to give that a quick second to dry. I am going to hit it with a little bit of varnish, but there's one final set of steps to really finish this out. So 1 second with a snap. All right, so for the last step, it is time to come in and tidy up our work here. And for that, I will use a little bit of black contrast paint. On my desk here, I've got black Templar. I didn't mention it at the beginning of this video, but it's something I have on hand for jobs such as this. But what we're going to do, and you could use black paint too, but I find the contrast paint to be pretty good for it. So I've gone ahead and sealed off these areas, and what we're going to do is we're going to black out right next to them. So be very careful. I'm just going to come in and we're going to put a black kind of recess. A little bit of black lining. This helps hide some of our mistakes we may have made and also give us a more crisp separation between the panels that are right next to it and the work we have done. Helps make things pop out a little bit. And we got a little bit heavy right there. So while it's still wet, we're just going to come in with our wet paintbrush and try and sop up that. No big deal. Okay. Okay. Had a little excess here. So again, while it's wet, we're going to come in and sop up what we can. Like I said, this is it's a little difficult with the angle I have to hold this at and try and do it. In my natural habitat, it's a little different, but you get the idea. Okay. I touched a little bit of blue, so we're just going to clean that up. Okay. Trace the bottom of that. Again, just come in, tidy that up. Okay. I feel like my brush load on this was a little high, so we're getting a little bit more pooling than I had anticipated. Okay. Clean up right there. So for our last step, once we've got this area blacked in, we're going to come in with a little bit of a highlight color. For this, we've got dark ivory. You could skip this step if you want, but after you've done canopies, I find it's good to come in and touch up any areas that you may have messed up. These areas are very tight, so it's very easy to have brush strokes that flop in areas you don't want. So coming back in and just doing some highlights in some spot areas to fix that is good. Also, because this is the kind of front or focal point of your model, I find these highlights are kind of natural anyway. So coming in and fixing those makes sense because this is the front and the kind of upmost spot. And I'm also going to fix an error that we had here before that looked fine. I had done a little bit of red freehand on the nose here, but now that the canopy glass is done, I don't really like this little red down here. I think it looks not good, so we're just going to highlight over that. There we go. And we'll come over here and we will try and mirror what we did on the other side. Okay. And we'll pull this one right here. There, and that really helps tidy up some of the areas. And because we highlighted those, let's go ahead and get some spots right here just to add some separation between the glass and the armor plates. And we had a slight brush stroke malfunction, so we'll just go in there and sop that up. There we go. And you can spend as much time doing this as you want. The sky really is the limit, especially when it comes to edge highlighting. I'm guilty of spending exorbitant amounts of time hitting a whole bunch of areas that are probably unnecessary, but it's a thing I do. Once I kind of get going on a mini, it's a little bit of catharsis, I think, a little bit of a release, and I just get going, and that's what I like to do. In this case, we're doing some tidying up, and you'll notice that the highlights right here are pretty close to the color of the mini as it is, so we're not actually getting much out of it, but it does help add some separation between the cockpit or the canopy glass and the actual dark recesses we had and the mini itself. So that said, I think that right there is going to call it for the colors. The final step that I would do on this, I know I keep having more steps. We're going to come in with a little bit of ultra matte varnish. Then a quick shake. This won't take very much. And we're going to load up our brush here. And we're just going to go over our canopy with the matte varnish. And it's okay if we feather back into the armor plates as well. Should be safe to put this over. Just be careful if you do this and you haven't been doing layers of varnish in between, because you don't want to reactivate that contrast paint and start having those colors spew all over your mini. That is not what we want. And just make real sure we got a good coat over that. All right, so let's give that a moment to dry, and then we'll see the final product. And there we go. The matte varnish is dry, and our tutorial Turkina is now complete. So I've taken you guys through start to finish on this guy, and with the final step being the canopy. Are there other things you could do? Yes, you could hand edge highlight the whole thing. You could work more on the metals. You could spend a million more hours on the canopy, but I think for showing you guys some techniques, this has covered. It's across the gambit. It's given you a lot of things to consider and work on. And here at the end, I think the canopy was the cherry, the icing on top, the final step to make this cake complete, so to speak. I really like this. One thing I would say is the blue to red transition isn't quite as well as I wanted. The blending ability with standard acrylics versus the speed paints is a little different, and I got impatient. What I should have done is let those two colors dry separately and leave that line in between longer, and then worked out a middle color, and I didn't, and we've got a separation that's not quite as good as I wanted, but we salvaged it with a reasonable gradient, I think. But with a little bit of practice, you guys can get used to that too. I highly recommend you try doing some of that with standard acrylic paints as well. That said, thank you for coming along with me on this journey. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you learned a thing or two, sign off in the comments below. Hit that like button, thumbs up in the video, and letting me know, showing some love. If you worked on any of the stuff that you saw in this video, also sign off in the comments. Share some links. Let me see your Instagram. I'll show some love and check out what you've been working on. That said, folks, that's going to conclude our tutorial Turkina. I had a blast. Hope you enjoyed. I'm not sure when my next tutorial will be out, but when I get the muse, when I get the time, I'll try and get some stuff done. As always, thank you guys for hanging out with me. Keep rolling your dice, keep painting your models, and I will catch you guys next time. Pew, pew, pew! Oh my God, I can't believe you let a clan wolf paint me. I'm supposed to be a jade turkey. Meow! If you guys are still sitting here watching this, let's take a moment to put a pop-up here to showcase those wonderful Patreon supporters here. We'll let that scroll here, and thank you so much for supporting what I do. That's super awesome. I really do appreciate that.